guys, welcome to another episode of Unresolved Textual Tension. My name is Lindberg, and I am joined today by my lovely, ruggedly handsome co-host, William.
Hey guys.
And we have read a YA book that we didn't hate. Bum, bum, bum.
And it's not even fantasy either, which is kind of crazy because that's what every other book on this channel has been, except for that one terrible Bible book we read. Before we start, though, very importantly, I asked this for people in the live stream because this is a book club live stream. Join our Patreon, support independent journalism. My shirt, in the comments, vote. Is it more golfing or tax fraud? Now, All My Rage is the book we read this week by Sabaa Tahir. We had both previously read her book, Ember in the Ashes. You can find that in our playlist. I'll try to remember to put it up here, but probably won't because I'm lazy. Which was like a YA fantasy book that I thought was maybe one of the dumbest things I'd ever read. Lindberg, what did you think of Ember in the Ashes?
I read the entire quadrilogy. I think it's a quadrilogy. I meant to look up what the titles were before this stream, but I didn't have time.
Reaper at the Gates, I think, is the second one.
An Ember in the Ashes, a Reaper at the Gates, a Torch Against the Night, and the last one, I don't remember. Anyway, I read all four of them because while they are very formulaic, very uninteresting in my opinion. Yeah, very, very dull. And I wanted all the main characters to die at the end. And I did not get what I want. I do think that Sabaa is a competent writer. Like, if all of YA fantasy, like epic scale YA fantasy, is in one sphere, and most of them are like over in this corner and being really bad, then Sabaa is over in this corner, and it's still YA fantasy, but it's not that bad.
She can't quite break out of the quadrant. And I actually, I didn't think she was a good writer, but Lindberg had vouched for this book. She was like, it's actually a really good book. And I'm always kind of curious to see if writers can change. I fundamentally don't really think so. But one thing I noticed is we read Leah Bardugo's Six of Crows and Shadow and Bone trilogy, and then we had read her book Ninth House, I think it was called, and that book was actually much better than the other two. And I was like, oh, okay. Part of it I think is she's grown as a writer, and part of it is that a modern setting fits her writing style much better. And so I was curious to see if the same thing had happened with Tahir. And I actually really thought this book was pretty good. It's not my favorite. There are certain things about it that I don't think work quite well. But there is her writing style matches this world much better. And I don't know if maybe because Ember of the Ashes was her first book, but the characters feel a little bit more developed, and their melodrama, because there's still quite a lot of melodrama, feels more earned. And I think you can also tell that this is a topic that's closer to her heart, and she has more of a, she's not making up a fantasy culture from whole cloth and doing it poorly. She is Pakistani American. She knows what she's writing about in a way that, she doesn't about faux Rome and faux India.
Mm-hmm. She is in part writing about things that she has experienced or that people in her close proximity have experienced. And you can just tell that there is a lot of heart in this novel. There's a lot of care for all the characters, even the bad ones, because she makes such a conscious attempt to show just how bad situations don't leave people with a lot of room to be morally good all the time.
That is actually one of the biggest things, is this book has a lot of sympathy for all of its characters, and that already was such a big difference from Ember in the Ashes. Ember in the Ashes, the main boy toy's mother is evil, but supposed to be not totally evil, but she's also just totally evil. And that you can kind of see that as the bare bones of the relationships with the parents that the characters in this book have, where their parents are very flawed, but still there's a sympathy for them of the plight that they're going through. Very quickly, though, we should give the premise. Would you like to give the premise, Lindberg?
I think even before that, we need to highlight Sarah's comment.
Yeah, Zara says, tax fraud. You just need a lorazepam wife. Well, I might
What?
need.
I have no idea what lorazepam is.
I think it's a drug that they're on to calm them
Oh,
down.
oh
So,
yeah.
but as you guys know, I'm starting a cult, or not starting. I'm in the process of a cult, so I actually need multiple lorazepam wives, sister wives. Okay, what's the premise, Lindbergh?
The premise is. Oh, thank you, Sarah.
Yeah,
it's a tranquilizer. I completely lost my stride.
Premise.
The premise for All My Rage is that it centers around two kids called Noor and Salahuddin, who are Pakistani immigrants, first generation descendants. Noor is the first generation immigrant from Pakistan, and Salahuddin is a first generationer. And they live in a small
Salahuddin
town
is
out in
second
the
generation.
desert. First generation born in America, I meant.
That's generally referred to as second generation.
I'm European. You cannot discriminate against me.
We should state that at the beginning, that we have to go easy on Lindbergh here. She is Swedish, so there's a whole thing about the prison industrial complex in America I'm going to have to explain to her later, because it's going to be basically as strange as the sci-fi books we read.
Yes, and you simply must relentlessly make fun of everything that I don't know how to say correctly, because those are the rules.
Yes.
As a Swedish peasant. Anyway, they live in a small desert town called...
I do not remember. It's in California.
Yeah.
It's deserty. Nevada? No. I don't know. I barely remembered their names until I looked at them this morning.
It's a cute name. Yeah. No, it's a cute name. And Salahuddin's parents run a bed and breakfast that is not doing too well at the moment. His mum is very sick, and because they are poor, they don't have health insurance. And his father is prone to the drink. And Salahuddin is just a kid struggling to get through high school. He's got some issues. He has just fought with his childhood best friend, Noor. So they are estranged from each other, and it's kind of awkward between them. On the other hand, Noor is, like I said, a Pakistani immigrant. She was rescued from a terrible earthquake by her uncle, who brought her to America and gave up his own future to raise her. And Noor is very ambitious. She wants to get out of... Oh, I almost had the name of the town. God damn it. She wants to get out of the town. She wants to become a doctor. She wants to make something of her life. She wants to be better. And she feels like the town is holding her down.
Yeah. And so you kind of intersperse their two points of views in the modern day, and then there is, between the chapters, a point of view of Salahuddin's, which I'm probably just going to call Sal, Sal's mother as she immigrates from... It's her life as she gets married in Pakistan, and then comes over to the U.S. and has Salahuddin, and it's kind of like her story. Which, to be honest, I found to be the most compelling part of this book, because I liked her as a character more than I cared about Noor or Sal, because, like, they're just very teenager. Just the worst things happen to them in their entire life. Like, so much bad random shit happens to these kids.
Yeah, but also sometimes when you read YA, you complain that it doesn't feel like someone writing actual teenagers going through teenage things. This is a book where the teenagers very much feel like teenagers. Like, they are trying to make good decisions, but they just don't always know what it is. And they have the typical teen problems where it's friends, and it's being awkward, and it's school tests, and it's figuring out who you are, and the fact that you don't know who you are yet and what you want in life. There's a lot of emphasis on how important culture is as well. Noor is very, very musically interested. Like, her life goes to a soundtrack. She has created her own life soundtrack by listening to the bands she love and that help her through her everyday struggles, which is something I very much relate to because I was a metalhead as a teenager, and that saved my life, basically. I was a very, very confused child.
It's not just ABBA there, guys. They have more genres.
Hey, Scandinavia is like metal capital in the world. Have you seen that meme where it's like about the metal band that has gotten lost and frozen to death?
No, but that would make a great horror movie.
Yeah, because all of the metal bands' album covers are them being out in some frozen sort of tundra-looking place. And the joke is that they get lost, so the Coast Guard needs to go find them.
That's very funny. Yes, I will say that this book, I mean, again, as I said at the beginning, I'm going to be comparing it a lot to Ember and the Ashes and other YA in general in terms of the things I think it does better. And because that's kind of just the lens that I ingested this book through. The other part of the reason that I'm doing that, though, is because I didn't feel like this book really had, it's not that it didn't have a point, I just didn't think it quite knew what it wanted to say in a way that came together entirely. I think the author was very emotionally invested in the material, and that shows through the page, and it makes it very engaging to read. But at the end, I was left a little bit like, what exactly was what you're trying to say? And part of that also, I think, is I came in with the expectation that this was going to be more about the second generation culture and assimilation and issues like that. And the book is a little bit like that, but I actually think that's almost not set dressing, because I know that's a big part of what the author was interested in, but it didn't feel like it really fit into the more generational trauma theme that the book had going. And we'll kind of talk about that as we go, I think, because Lindbergh, you had more of a view of it fitting in, I think.
Did I?
Well, you thought the book was better. So speak on that.
Yeah, last night I said, I love this book and I'll fight anyone who disagrees.
How did you think the themes of the book kind of came together better than I did?
You say that you felt like the book lacked a thesis, sort of, whereas I felt the book did have a very clear thesis in generational love and how relations transcend the flow of time. Like this book to me is truly Misbah's story. Misbah is the mother. Because everything starts with how she is in her home native country that she doesn't want to leave. She wants to stay and she wants to have her own life. But because she's a woman, her father sets her up in an arranged marriage. And because she's a good daughter, she goes along with it. And when her husband's parents die tragically, he has nothing keeping him in Pakistan. So they emigrate to America. And in America, we see Misbah discover and then struggle to grip the American dream. And because of how American society is geared, it's hard. Like, they have a very hard time. Her husband drinking.
Yes. But see, I felt like
and
that...
her being sick.
I feel like that almost isn't really tied into... See, again, I think the thing about it is that if I could divorce this from more of a second generation issue and American racism issue, I feel like I would have felt like this book... And again, I think some of that is I just went in expecting that, and it wasn't quite what it was. And the book also is like, hey, isn't everybody really racist? But the thing is, the ways that they're racist don't super affect the core issues that the characters have in my mind, and how I view it. And we'll kind of talk about that more as we go. because it's a big part of the book, and I don't want to, we try to string out the discussion a little bit more nowadays than jumping into everything all at once.
Let's not front load it too much. I have thoughts about that as well.
Yes, I should state just right off the bat my bona fides that I am actually a second-generation immigrant as well. My mom was from Colombia, though really she's more of a second generation because she came here when she was so young. I'm also like half gringo, but I don't talk about that much. And one of the things to note about America is that, like, the immigrant experience is so incredibly varied from place to place that, I can't necessarily...
And also what kind of immigrant you are. Like, what your skin color is, what you look like, what your home country is.
Yeah, when you came over. So, like, for example, this town is pretty virulently racist, but, like, when my grandparents came over, they moved to Tennessee, which is, like, the South, and they were very warmly received. There was very little of like the otherization. They were taught English. Their neighbors were very friendly, and part of that is like they moved there 60 years ago, and my grandfather was a doctor with a bunch of other doctors that moved over at the same time, and so it's like, and that's kind of what I mean is there's a lot of variance in the immigrant experience. And at certain points, I'm going to say, like, I don't know if this fit or that fit, but I don't mean to illegitimize the author's either experience or portrayal. It's hard for me to say anything in the book is unrealistic because it probably is actually like that at times. And also part of it, I think, is that the author... in Ember the Ashes, I immediately was on the side of the evil empire because I'm a contrarian and I dislike when authors try to tell me how to feel and they're not very subtle about it. And like that prickled a little bit here where I'm like, okay, really, they're that racist? But that's just my inner contrarian more than trying to excuse the racism or saying it's unrealistic. But I felt like it was just kind of important to get out of the way. That's kind of how I'm viewing the novel.
Can you highlight Chris M's comment?
You actually can as well, I think. You just may not be in the correct...
I'm not logged in, so probably I can't.
Chris M says, I think the strongest theme was about managing loss. I actually think that's true. I feel like sometimes these themes are brought up, but they're not as explored as they could be. And part of that, I guess, is that this is a YA novel. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not necessarily supposed to be a super complex view of, loss and drug use and immigrant communities. It's kind of just supposed to be like, okay, these are kind of my feelings on it for a teenage crowd. And then also we should state Lindbergh is Swedish first generation, all generation. How long have you been there? How long has your family been in Sweden?
So far back as I think it's the 1600s. I'm white as fuck, guys. Sorry.
Snow, pale as snow. Okay. Do you... Oh, this is what I was gonna... I couldn't remember what I was gonna transition into, so I just said that. Lindbergh, on this channel, do we have a Patreon attached to it?
You son of a bitch! We do have a Patreon on this channel. Or I should say, they have a Patreon on this channel, because I am notoriously just the intern, but since Will is an evil cult leader, he likes offloading this responsibility.
For the record, it's not an unpaid internship. They can afford one lunch a month.
You do support your workers eating food.
Proletariat rights.
Survive. Yeah.
No justice, no peace. All right, go ahead.
But indeed, we do have a Patreon on this page. On the first Patreon tier, you get to be part of this lovely, lively Discord community. You get to talk with us about all kinds of things like books, media, writing. We have a very dedicated, very lively writers forum where people give each other feedback and trade ideas, and it's just lovely. And you also get early access to the videos, if I remember correctly.
You do. This went up yesterday. I put it up late because I forgot, but you do get them early by at least 12 hours.
Mm-hmm. And if you're part of the second tier, the book club tier, you get to hear Will make these kind of admissions that you otherwise would not hear, because twice per month we do a live stream. In the mid-month book, we read something that Will has picked. that is usually terrible, but he thought it was going to be good.
This is one of them. I don't know what you're talking about.
We get to talk about it with the guys of the UTT crowd, and once per month we nominate and vote for a book club book that we all get to read together, and then we do a live stream and talk about it.
Indeed. And then in the third tier, that most magical and rare of tiers, what do they get?
In the Parasocial Darlings tier, you get access to a special live stream every month where Will and Katie do a in detail critique of authors' writings. They look at good examples of writings. They look at worse examples of writings, specific scenes. They talk about what the scene accomplishes, and and how the author. They talk about prose.
Mm-hmm. And actually, for our last one, Lindbergh joined us to look at Wolf Hall, which was one of our favorite books of all time, and one of my favorite books of all time now. And just like the way the author does the craft of getting across like characters through the dialogue, and again the prose. It's the kind of thing we don't really talk a lot about here because we mostly listen to the audiobook versions of them. If I read the text version, I would highlight more and go into it a little bit. But also these videos are already way too long, so maybe could we have our separate thing for that. Join our Patreon and support independent journalism. Okay, so this book starts off with Lindbergh. How does this book start off?
I think it starts with Misbah, doesn't it?
Yes, it starts with Misbah, and she is going to meet a date for like a marriage that her family has. It's not an exactly arranged marriage in the way we think of it, but it's like a, hey, do you want to, if you like this guy, you're going to marry him.
It's arranged marriage in the sense that her father says that, Misbah, it's time for you to marry and to do the journey that I went through when I was married to your mother. And she kind of says that she does not feel ready for this. She is too young. She is 18 at the time. And she does not know anything about relationships and intimacy. She has never really wanted to be that close to a man. But because she loves her father so much, she agrees to go on a blind date with the oldest, and I think he's the only son in this family. Mm-hmm. And I think it's implied that her father in part picked this dude because the family was good, but also because as an only son, he was definitely going to stay in Pakistan, and so they could keep their family close together and alive.
Yeah, I believe so. That, or? No, I got that sense as well, and it's kind of one of these things where in those cultures, it's kind of when you're marrying, it's not just your decision of who you like. It's kind of like, you know, her father also very much likes him, we find out later on, so it was probably also a certain amount of like, oh, I like this guy, he would be a good fit for the family. You know, he also will be taking care of his family because he's the only son, as you said. Mm-hmm. And taking care of your parents is a really massive part of South Asian culture. Yes, so that's how it starts.
But also, family in this part of the world, family isn't just mother, father, daughters, their children. It's usually extended family as well. It's cousins, like the whole clan is part of the family. So they do a lot more. What is the term? Is it communal thinking as opposed to individual thinking and decision making?
Yeah, and they have more like generational households, from what I understand, from having watched a lot of 90 Day Fiancé and white Americans going over there and being completely flummoxed by it. I'm mildly kidding, but that is very funny whenever that happens. But yeah, so like you expected, like the grandparent, you will take care of your parents and they will live in your house, which I kind of wish was a little bit more explored when we then get to America. But We'll talk about it. And so that's where her story starts out. And then we go into Saladin's perspective. And basically, he is having a rough time of it at school. He got into a fight, as we said, with his best friend Noor, who will be the other point of view. And basically, we find out almost immediately that she was like last summer was like, hey, we should make out and be a couple. I love you. And he's like, he panicked and was like, ew, stop ruining things. And like, this is something where the relationship between them is very fraught of like, oh, he touched my hand and then I pulled away, kind of like a feeling. And in Ember in the Ashes, it was the same way, but there it wasn't earned. Here, it kind of makes sense that they would be like that based off of like, oh, they were friends and they went through this fight and there's this underlying attraction. And I liked that. I thought that worked better. In general, I thought they were pretty okay characters, and I thought they were kind of cute together. I didn't love them. Like, it's not even that I didn't love them. I just didn't find myself very attached to them. I was kind of very like, okay, whatever happens with them happens with them. But you go ahead, Lindbergh. I can see you having thoughts.
I kind of want to highlight Jukebox the Ghoul's comment. Pakistan has a lot of immigrant workers. The latter children would very likely emigrate to work and send money back. The UAE abuses a lot of immigrant workers. That is another shade of this. Like, it is so common to send your next generation out as well to earn money and send back to the family to take care of the older generation. I got the sense that Misbah's dad did not want that for her.
Yeah,
and her husband.
I didn't really feel like that's something you can read into the novel, but I didn't feel like it was ever really acknowledged by the novel. Which I kind of in general would like when novels tell you a little bit more about how you're supposed to read them. Otherwise, it's like almost any reading can be supported. But I think in this case,
the one mention we get is that he is an only son, and as such, he would never abandon his parents and abandon in the sense of moving abroad.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true. I think that is a sustainable reading.
Which could be a concern the father has as social commentary, because it is so established that this is something that happens to the younger generation in Pakistan.
I also, in Misbeth's plotline, would have liked to know more of what was going on in Pakistan at the time, because, like, you know, that's a country that's gone through a lot of turmoil, and especially when people move or immigrate, a lot of times it's because something is happening in their culture that doesn't work out, or their country that's not working out great. So, like, for example, California has a lot of Sikhs, which is a particular kind of Indian person, because at the time they were facing a lot of adversity and racism in their own country, so they all just started immigrating over to America. And I think, again, that would have been something that could play into a little bit more of the immigrant experience. Pakistan kind of exists in a platonic state or a static state in Misbah's memory.
Yes, Chris M. I also got the impression that they left because her husband was having a hard time seeing reminders of losing his parents everywhere around the city.
I do think that is a little bit of a commentary too, but we'll talk about that more when we get there. Okay, Salahuddin and Noor. What did you think of them?
I do think that it was presented the thesis that they had a falling out, and that it was because of a misunderstanding, and they both feel very bad about it, and they both wish they could take it back. It felt very genuine to me. Like, this is just the type of thing that teenagers do. Like, they do things, and they don't talk about them because it's so much tied into your sense of who you are, your self-confidence. And you also spend a lot of time reading into what the other might be thinking and what their behavior might mean and such. So it was interesting to me to get their opposite perspectives, because at first we get Salah, and he kind of thinks of it more as a fight between them, and he kind of regrets how he handled it. And in the next chapter, when we go over to Noor, we see her feeling rejected. And she is very embarrassed about being rejected by Salah. She feels like she ruined their friendship. And because of that, she has also become half estranged from Misbah, who has been a sort of proto-mother to her.
Yeah, so in South Asian cultures and Middle Eastern cultures, generally, so for example, she uses the term auntie to refer to Misbah, which is sort of a catch-all term for not necessarily your aunt, but just a female, an older woman who you are close to. It's it could be your aunt, it could be a friend, it could be a third time removed aunt or whatever. And that's kind of very much the relationship she has with Misbah. We get later on the depth of their connection from Misbah's point of view. But in this first chapter, I was like, or first part, I didn't feel that they were as strongly connected as you get later on, which I think is a little bit of a loss.
I think it's to me, it reads as a way to show that because of how Noor has been, what her past is and how she has been raised, because her uncle raises her very lovelessly. He is very harsh, he's cruel. He is extremely bitter about having to drop out of American university to take care of his brother's daughter. So I think, in a sense, her feeling of separation from Misbah and her inability to trust that Misbah loves her is because of what she's been through. And possibly we could have gotten Misbah's perspective a little earlier, so we could tie them together to show this more clearly, that Misbah sees her as the daughter, but because of her life, Noor does not trust love. She does not trust that other people care and love her. It could have been shown a little more clearly, but I still felt like I got a strong sense of it.
You do get a sense of it, yeah. No, and I think that's an interesting commentary on it. Noor's uncle, whose name I already have forgotten and will not remember, he runs a liquor store, and like Limber said, he's very bitter about having had to take care of Noor. I immediately got the impression that that may not have been why he wasn't able to do college, and he's kind of using her as a scapegoat a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think
we'll call him Chachu.
Yeah, Chachu, you're right. Yeah, and he is like a little bit like, oh, okay, that's left ambiguous by the author, which I think is for the best. And he is interesting because he has very much rejected Pakistani culture. He is very much like, no, don't speak the language here, you look foolish, that kind of a thing. And that I did like. That's a thing that happens with immigrants sometimes, is some people try to stick stronger to their cultures, others are embarrassed of it and want to push it away. And I like that variance, showing like one person is one way and another person is another way. And he also very much expects
something that creates separation within immigrants, even from the same culture and from the same country. Like, the people who wants to stay true to their culture often feel like they are being pushed away from the people who want to
embrace,
integrate more. And the people who want to integrate often feel like they have to separate from the other people of their culture, because they feel like they are being the good kind of immigrants who are doing everything to adapt to society, to learn the language. And here comes all these other people who are the type of people that white people usually don't like very much, because they speak weird languages and their house smells funny and they have so many kids and their kids just run around all the time and make a lot of noise, and it's terrible. Sweden actually has a lot of Eastern immigrants during the last 20 years. So I see this from the outside perspective. And I thought that was a very nice touch to the book, that she does talk about both Chachu, who is very anxious in wanting to be American and very bitter that he didn't get to live his American dream, but also Salahuddin has a cousin, an uncle cousin, Misbah's brother, is also in America.
Yeah.
And he is one of those successful immigrants who have made a lot of money and has a really nice house, has everything he wants in terms of things like they can afford nice cars, they have a nice house, they live in a good neighborhood, and he pretty much pretends like his sister and her family don't exist. They hang out if situation requires it, but the rest of the time he's like, ugh, my sister and her family.
At one time, Salahuddin goes and asks him for some help, and his uncle is like, "Look, your father's got to make it on his own or not," which is like such a American thing of like, well, if this was meant to work, it was meant to work or not. It's like it's your fault if it doesn't work. Which, again, I would have liked a little bit more of a cultural view of like, because it's not like South Asian culture is not extremely classist, and I would have liked maybe a little bit more exploration of how that manifests in second generation and immigration, but it's not entirely necessary.
That would have been fascinating, but at the same time, I think maybe that would move the focus a little from YA, because this book is very targeted at younger teens. Like, you really get a sense that this book is for 14-year-olds who are going through shit.
Yeah, and one of the examples of it is that Noor. So it should be stated that in terms of this Pakistani people in this area, they're like only like a few families. This is not a place where a lot of them moved to, and so it's worth, because originally when it's shown that Noor and Salahuddin are like the only brown kids and like they are the only friends the other one has, I was a bit like, that doesn't totally make sense. Like when people immigrate, they tend to all immigrate to the same area. So like they would have other friends that in school that are like that. But it's specifically mentioned, and this is one of the things I talked about in terms of the variance between regions and experiences, is that like this is one where there's very few people. They're like the few brown kids around. And one of the ways that this is sort of the 101 version of immigration discussion is the way that the two of them are their only each other's friends because they were the only two brown kids, so they bonded. And like that makes sense intuitively, and it's in terms of a novel, I understand that the author really likes that, like it's the two of them against the world. But like in actuality, a lot of times if there's only like two brown kids in a school, they don't like being grouped together in terms of like, I remember reading a discussion once of a black kid who mostly grew up in a white town, and he was like, he really just liked that the other black kid and him always had to go into the center of the picture because otherwise it looks unbalanced because of colors and whatever like that. Like just because you are both brown does not mean there is an automatic kinship, and in fact there can be a kind of, I don't want to be associated necessarily with those other people, and not that that has to be the way that it is, but I feel like that would be a little bit more of a complex discussion that would have been interesting to see, but that this book is staying at the first level.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to be the case, but it can also be the case. When I grew up on the Swedish countryside, and up to the age of 13, I had pretty much never seen a person with dark skin. And then I got to high school, and we had two kids in my class called Poya and Akam. Poya was from Iran, and Akam was from Kurdistan. And they two very much ended up bonding together because they had this kind of same sort of familial problems as first generation immigrants. Their parents were struggling a lot to integrate into society. They were kind of isolated, and in Sweden it is very expected for parents to show up for functions and to take a very active role in their kids' education and in their extracurriculars. And their parents never showed up, and that was something that was very unique to them. So I think without meaning to, they ended up being very close friends. And that's not to say that they didn't have other friends. And I think we also see Salah and Noor having other people they're friendly with. But they have a very strong reason for bonding more closely to each other.
Yeah, and I felt like it made more sense as the novel went on and we got Misbeth's view of how their relationship started. In terms of their bond is not, at first you're like, their bond is that they're the two brown kids, and then later on you're like, okay, no, there's actually like a lot of other things going on about why they're bonding, and their initial experience kind of makes a little bit more sense. And again, this is not to say that the way the book is doing it is illegitimate. It's just that like I would have liked something a little bit maybe more complex, or something a little less expected, because you do kind of expect the two brown kids to be together against the white kids, like, you know, against the world.
I kind of took the comment about the two brown kids as an expression of Salah feeling stared at by the white people, by all the white people. Like he felt like he was the brown kid, and he felt like Noor was the other brown kid. And that does not necessarily correspond with everyone's experience of it.
Well, but the thing is, if you're in a society where being the brown kid is bad, you do not want to be related to the only other brown kid around. Like there's a certain amount of internalized racism, kind of like with her uncle, where it would be like, oh no, I don't quite want to be related with the thing that unfortunately, it's kind of like how some of the most outspoken racists have like don't totally belong to the in group to begin with. They feel like they have to be loud to show that they have to be louder than people who are secure in their identity, to show that they do belong for sure. I worded that a little poorly, but like but
that's okay.
But it's sort of the way that I insist on being more Hispanic than I really need to be, because I'm a little bit insecure about not being Hispanic enough. The little dog barks loudest. And so that's something where, again, it's not wrong. I would have liked to see something a little bit different. But Noor gets to school finally. Her and Salahuddin and the Paul are like, we're not talking right now. He hides in the bathroom from his hot blonde girlfriend, who I really liked, called Ashley, and she's unfortunately not in the book enough. And in there, he hears a drug deal going on between the local school drug seller guy and another student. And when he comes out, the drug seller guy is like very chill, and he's like, hey, your mom's sick, right? She's on pain pills. Like, you know, if you want to slip me some, that's good money. And so the dean is like, no, that's bad. And that's also kind of not necessarily where we find it out, but his mother has a kidney issue that she is not really treating. She needs to be going to dialysis, and she's not, because of how expensive it is. And this is something where this is a cultural difference I'm going to have to explain to Lindbergh. Because you're Swedish. Here in America, when people are sick, it is viewed as an opportunity to siphon all the money away from them as much as possible while they're under this duress. So our healthcare system is not really geared towards being affordable. So in the US, we have like insurance, and if you don't have insurance, you're really screwed. And even if you do have insurance, you probably don't have very good insurance.
Wait. So you mean your society is built around the idea that getting healthcare is a monetary question?
Yes, it's part of the free market.
If poor people can't afford healthcare, maybe they should just die?
Well, as all Republican politicians will put, nobody would like throw them out of the hospital if they collapsed there. But that's not actually a sustainable way of treating.
Isn't that actually something that happens, though?
Yes.
If they collapse in the wrong kind of hospitals, because there's clinics that are...
No, and actually there's a part where they'll need to call an ambulance for his mother. And literally my first thought was, oh, don't do that. That's so expensive. Like, don't do that. Don't call an ambulance. Those are so incredibly expensive, and people have died because they had to reroute halfway through to a different hospital because the original hospital they were going to didn't take their insurance. So that is something where it's like, yeah, that is a part of American experience, is incredibly bad healthcare just in general, and being way too expensive.
And that is also something that was very interesting for me to read, because I am from a nation that has free healthcare. If someone is ailing, you call the ambulance. You don't think about how much it's going to cost you, and it's not going to cost you a crazy amount either. And if it's more than you can pay, then there is financial instances that can kind of help you pay it off. And it is so obvious that they are going to take you to the nearest hospital first. And if your injury is of the nature that you need specialist care, then usually they fly you by helicopter to the hospital that can save your life, pretty much.
Yeah, it's real crazy. So that was something where I was like, oh yeah, no, that's a very American experience kind of situation. But yes, his mother is dying of kidney disease because she's not getting dialysis as much as she should, because she needs to work at the family bed and breakfast, which is not profitable. It's never really explained why it's not profitable. I could not quite figure it out. It's just like, and this is something where like I would have liked more of a second generation of like, oh, maybe it's not profitable because everybody's racist, or it's not profitable because there was some kind of a law at the time that made it hard for brown people to make money. Like, you know, this was like 100 years before, but, or not actually even 100 years before, like 50 years before, but, you know, there was like the Chinese exclusionary acts because too many Chinese people had laundry mats, and white business owners didn't like that. So that's something where I like, again, this is something where I think, I think I went in thinking this was going to be a book about second generation immigration because racism is such a large part of the book, but actually it really is just about generational trauma and loss. But if healthcare is a right, where would thematic character building come from?
It's true. That's true. Like, this whole book couldn't exist.
The other thing to mention about Salahuddin is that his father is an alcoholic. And originally I thought the book was going to be like, ooh, bad. But it isn't. The book is actually very sympathetic to alcoholism as a disease. And we find out more of the reasons for why his father has such problems with drinking. And I like that. Again, it's one of the ways that I felt like the book was very sympathetic. And as I get older, I more and more appreciate authors who are sympathetic and curious to the people in their worlds and don't just have them there as a means of being punching bags, though there are a couple of those characters in this book. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm like, can I speak now? The town is Juniper.
It's okay,
it was driving me crazy. I looked it up. The town is Juniper, and it's in California. I also really appreciated the depiction of alcoholism because it didn't go the way of being just like, oh, alcoholism it's a disease. We should never be skeptical of how alcoholists behave. They aren't just hapless victims. We also show how alcoholism is a disease that badly affects the people, the loved ones, the relations that alcoholics have. And in many ways, the book goes quite far to show just how badly Salahuddin's father lets him down, because Abu is more focused on his pain and escaping his pain through alcohol. And that is a tragedy in itself, and that is also part of the essence of this discussion, why alcoholism is such a debilitating disease, because it makes victims out of everyone. Even the only real perpetrator is alcohol, and that is a legal substance that a lot of people are kind of expected to imbibe in a healthy way. And how it's kind of seen as a moral failure when someone can't imbibe it in a healthy way, in moderation.
I
And
think it's
they also
also
talk a little bit about the shame that is created.
I also like that throughout the book, Salahuddin's father will quit and then like 2 days later become an alcoholic again. And it's like, yeah, that's actually very realistic for there to be a very bumpy, like in books, often there's a moment where they quit addiction, but in real life, it's like, it's something that keeps going and going. And you like are a skipping stone on the water that either falls in or escapes. To use a really potent visual metaphor that I came up with on the moment. I would have, drug use is also going to be a thing in this book that's talked about, but I wish there had been a little bit more connection between alcoholism and drug addiction by the characters or Salahuddin. Also, Dragon Slayer says, also, since the timeline-wise, they would have started before 2008 financial crisis, so decent chance any possible gross was reversed by that, talking about the inn, the bed and breakfast. I would have just liked the novel to talk about that. Like, that's really the thing, is like, if that's the case, I would have liked the book to have mentioned why they were doing so poorly. Also, I want to talk about it that, like, it is not really that clear what time period this takes place in. And so at times I felt like that added a certain layer of, like, you know, Salahuddin is a nerd because he talks about Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. And I'm like, really? Like, is he a nerd from the 80s? Like, what do you like? This is like this is a very clear problem with the author only knowing those kinds of references. I'm like, he's not talking about like Transformers, which is much more of like a 90s kid kind of thing, or if this is supposed to be the modern day, like Fortnite. Like, you know what I mean? It felt a little bit at times unclear.
Well, okay, so we see that people have cell phones and that Noor listens to music on her cell phone. So already we know that she is millennial or Gen Z.
Yes.
Her and Salah. And yes, you could do what we'll say and draw from maybe more typical things that 90s and early 2000s kids would have been interested in. But also, I think what she wants to show is that Juniper is a very conservative little small town that are often kind of lagging behind the big metropolitan areas that Will, for example, is a part of. Like, you guys are so far ahead.
Okay,
and
but
you
in
might
terms of
have
nerd culture, there's the
influences.
internet. I actually do think, thinking back on it, this is actually probably contemporary because they mention things like Wi-Fi and cancel culture, and like very specific ICE-related kind of mentions of that feel very contemporary. Not that those things haven't been around for like 10 years, but like it felt like this was supposed to be contemporary, but the authors the references were all like from her own childhood.
It's a little funny at times, but I'll say that as a Swedish person who comes from a small town and who lived in the countryside
is really
before Peter Jackson's movie trilogy about Lord of the Rings, you would absolutely have been considered a massive nerd if you had read the books and if you were a fan.
That's Sweden. No, there's actually a very funny story about the first time I watched No Country for Old Men. I didn't realize it was supposed to not take place in the modern day. I thought that's just how the South looked, like they just had a bunch of old cars. I was like, all the cultural markers, I was like, oh, I think this is just how it is over there. It took me a while to realize it was supposed to take place in like whatever time period. I don't know if it was the 70s or not, but like not the current day. Because he's like a Vietnam War vet. And like, I was like, that's kind of odd. That doesn't make sense. And then that's when I figured it out. Okay. All right. Let's get back to the actual plot, which is that, do you want to describe the next part?
I kind of lost track of where we were.
So what happens basically is that Noor hasn't been going to see Mizbeth because she's like, doesn't want to talk about the whole thing, but she feels with Salahuddin, but she feels bad because, like, you know, she was like a mother to her, like an auntie. And so she ends up going to see her because Salahuddin asks her to, because he got like his phone bill got cut off essentially. And while she's over visiting,
Oh yeah. His phone got cut off and he got held up as well because he was supposed to take his mum to dialysis. And he is really worried because if he's not there to kind of force her to do it, she has been skipping her dialysis. So he asks Noor to go.
Yeah, Dragon Slayer says the nerd thing is not helping by Star Wars and LTR references, but being real. But the Call of Duty, Game of Thrones, and Assassin's Creed were fake name-ologies. Okay, I thought so. That's true. Yeah, and also Jukebox Ghoul says the South just has sandworms. This is true. Yeah, just know.
Crown of Fate is obviously Game of Thrones. Like, it's so obviously Game of Thrones. But in a sense, I kind of like how it encapsulates that feeling of Game of Thrones making people who had never been interested in fantasy, who thought all that kind of stuff was silly, suddenly getting hooked on a fantasy show and starting using these colloquial terms that they would never have known before. At least where I live, that was such a big thing. Like, when my mom started watching Game of Thrones, I was like, what? Wow. You're watching what, did you say? Because my mom is the kind of mom who's like, oh, video games can't be real interests. And, it's kids should be outside and play. And she was really concerned that I spent so much time playing The Sims as a teen. And like, what's going to become of me? Like, oh, God, are you gonna become violent if you play GTA?
That we're showing our age a little bit there. Don't do the math on that. But yeah, no, it's kind of interesting. Oh, right. Okay. Back to the mom. So, she, the mother ends up having a liver attack. I don't know what it's called. She needs to go to the hospital. And so she gets rushed over there by
kidney failure.
Yes. She gets rushed over there by Noor and then dies in the hospital with Noor by her bedside. In a scene that I actually thought was pretty good, considering we'd only just met her a few pages earlier, essentially. But you do get a sense of oh, this is a real loss. And I think it's helped by the fact that the characters don't emote a ton about their grief. It's kind of a numb thing. So you as the reader are okay, I'm not expected to believe this very strong emotional reaction they're having. It's kind of a numb feeling.
Yeah, and reading the book the first time myself, I thought that, it's just going to be a health scare. And then she's going to come home and she's going to start taking dialysis seriously. And it's going to be a lesson for all of them. And then she dies. The book really played with my expectations there. So I felt kind of shocked and numb. And in playing on the characters reacting in similar ways, she kind of kept me grounded in the story. And I felt that the death was very impactful. And it's just the type of thing that would happen in real life as well, that the son had to go take care of the father who had showed up drunk to the hospital and who had started vomiting all over the place, because drunks be messy like that. So that Noor ends up being the one who is with Misbah when she passes away. Because in stories, usually you would have the main kind of character, or Salah would have been, be at his mother's bedside, and she would impose this wisdom or this request on him that he would grapple with the whole rest of the story. And instead, we get Noor, and we get not a final request either, because Misbah's last words are forgive.
Right. And she actually doesn't finish the sentence, we find out later.
Yeah, just forgive. And Noor takes that as a kind of command. Just forgive when the world does you injustice. Forgive people when they are being bad to you. And only later do we get kind of a different perspective on what Misbah meant when she said forgive.
And one thing we forgot to mention, actually, is that Misbah went to a fortune teller before she gets married, and the fortune teller tells her, you will have 3 children, one a boy, one a girl, and one that's neither, but also isn't trans. And you will fail them all. And so that's hanging over the book.
Misbah's next chapter, yeah, she goes to a fortune teller because she has kind of decided to go along with this marriage. And
Yeah.
yes, she's going to have 3 children, 1 boy, 1 girl, and one that is neither, and neither is they of the third gender.
Right. So
and you're
like,
going to fail them all. And at that time, you kind of go, is this just here for seasoning? Like, is this salt, just a little sprinkle of something, or is this going to be a theme?
Yeah, is this going to go somewhere is kind of the feeling as well. And so the other thing that happens, okay, so Salahuddin does not handle his mom's death great, but he basically tries to keep the hotel going all on his own. His father has now become even more drunk. Him and Noor have kind of reconciled a little bit. And she told him like, oh, it's fine, I'm over you. And he's like, oh no, she's over me. I should have said the thing I wanted to say. Him and Ashley break up. Bad move. I liked Ashley. And the other thing we find out is that like Noor is sending out a lot of applications for college to try to get out of the town. She wants to be a doctor. A little stereotypical, but and she's hiding it from her uncle who just wants her to work at the liquor store forever.
Can you highlight Chris M's comment?
Yeah, 1 second. I can hear myself a little bit, so I think you need to turn.
It's because you're so loud.
That was racist. I'm Hispanic. This is how we are.
The audio is in my headphones up here, and the microphone is down here. But you are so loud that you're catching feedback from. So turn down your microphone, Will. Calm down.
I am expressing my culture, which is being loud as a Hispanic person. This whole book is about cultural expression. It's weird that you didn't catch that. Chris M says, when I heard she's skipping dialysis, my immediate thought was, how is she alive? Yeah, you can't skip dialysis.
And it was so funny because I was watching the book club channel in those moments and I remembered what was going to happen. So it was just so fun for me to follow your kind of, this is kind of unrealistic. How is she even alive? And then you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
I also would have, this is another place that if the author had wanted to, they could have put in more of a cultural or tied the actions to a more cultural, like maybe, she felt the need to continue to work because culturally you don't necessarily take your health. I don't know a lot about Pakistani culture, so this might not be the case, but in a lot of South Asian, I don't want to just say ethnic communities, but it is just a lot of ethnic communities. You don't necessarily take the best care of your health if there's work to be done at the same time. Like, and I say that as somebody who's Hispanic, where there's also kind of a feeling. So that's something where I think, again, if we had wanted to, we could have tied that into the culture more of like, she felt the need, or even go the other way, go the way of like, she felt like, oh no, I have to work hard on this because this is the American dream. And we find out the American dream is a lie. You can work as hard as you want, but you're going to die poor because we don't have good health care.
I felt like it was implied, but you're right. We could have actually mentioned it. We could have talked a little bit about it. Mm-hmm. I got the sense that Misbah got this diagnosis, and a few years earlier, her own father had died of an illness that he never told her about. And suddenly she just got a letter that he had passed away, and she was devastated by this because she loved her Baba so much. I got the sense that she got this and she just processed that I don't have health insurance. Mm-hmm. I can't even afford treatment. So I'm just going to have to keep my head down, keep going, keep working, try to take care of my family and sort of not think about the fact that I'm going to die.
Yeah. And there could even also have been something of a gendered aspect to it, where it's like it's kind of expected that the woman works way more than she should, which that is a thing.
And suffer in silence.
Yes,
women
exactly.
are expected to suffer in silence. Otherwise, right. You're that kind of woman who yaps about her pains and aches, and men make funny jokes about you, and they roll their eyes, and they're like, "Oh, here she goes."
I can't wait till I get to that part of my life where I can do that. But yeah, no, that could have also been an element, but instead, it's treated very like it's not bland per se, but there's no greater aspect to it. I found. But she dies. Saladin is not handling it great. There's like a lot of money. She died in debt for the Airbnb. And the other thing we find out throughout this period is that
motel. It's a motel.
It's a motel
called the Cloud's Rest.
Yes. And what was I just saying before you interrupted? Oh, we also find out that Saladin has a lot of, or some kind of an unstated trauma in that he does not like being touched. He doesn't like it for whatever reason. He actually uses the excuse of having a medical disorder. And he also really does not like going into the laundry room, like a lot. And at the beginning you're like, that's a little odd, but I guess we're going to figure out later what's going on with it, and we will, but it's worth pointing out now.
Yeah. So Salah is not doing well. His father is doing even worse. The father is constantly drunk and just barely holding it together. So we get a scene where Salah is just looking at all the bills and realizing that there is just no way that they can pay this. They don't have any money in their account, and they haven't even gotten the hospital bill for Misbah yet. Mm-hmm. And there's a scene where his father is drunk and folding laundry, and he kind of falls down a little bit. He's like staggering around, and Salah is like, I want to try to comfort my dad. So he goes into the laundry room, and he has this really visceral bodily reaction. Like he feels sick, he feels dizzy, he has to get out. The smell just hits him like a ton of bricks, and he sort of panics.
Mm-hmm. And we'll find out more about that later. And originally I thought it was something having to do with like his mom having been him associating the laundry with his mom and it being a grief thing, but it actually wasn't. The thing, Nora actually really doesn't do a lot, I'm realizing, during this first half of the book. It's mostly Saladin's story. Basically, he realizes, hey, my mom still has some pain pills around. What if I go to that one kid and sell them? And the kid's like, you know what? I'm going to give you a business opportunity, and you can now just sell all drugs for me. And Saladin is like, okay, but not meth. And there's some Breaking Bad jokes.
I'm going to make you an offer that you can't refuse.
Yeah. But, I thought that was actually kind of very sympathetic in terms of like, yeah, that's how a lot of drug dealing happens is it's rich kids selling to other rich kids, which is the case of the guy he's selling to or went to. And then also it's people who really need money. Like it's a very good business, and he really feels the weight of, it is now up to him to save this thing his mother loved and to support his father.
Yeah, and it's a way for a kid to make quick money. He needs the money now. His father has kind of abandoned him totally. So he just needs this money now because he feels like he needs to save this motel that was his mother's love in life. Like she loved this place so much. He can't let her down. Like the last thing he can do for her is keep the motel going. So obviously he's going to accept. And it's so insidious of Art. Is he called Art?
Yeah, I think he is Art. Yeah, actually, I do think that's correct. We don't have Maria here to double check, but I think it's
it's so insidious of Art because Art is the cousin of Salah's ex-girlfriend, Ashley. So he knows what has happened, and it's so insidious of him to just use this kid who is in a precocious situation. But that is how it works. That is how it happens in real life, guys.
Well, and Art is also somewhat blinded by his own privilege in that he's a rich kid. He's not going to go to jail for selling drugs. And so that was something I thought was interesting is that Art doesn't necessarily, for Art, this is a bit of a game because he is rich and he's white and, he won't, Black people smoking weed is a crime.
Comment on that Art has this kind of armor because he's white, so he's not going to be searched. If he was stopped and searched, then he would have to go to prison because that's the law. But he has racial privilege.
Even then, in the American justice system, he would get a much lighter sentence. Like it not only would he have a better lawyer, but like they just don't care as much if you're white. We're going to talk later about the justice system and how like that's where I feel like this book really doesn't understand. Not that it doesn't understand racism, but we'll talk about it a little bit. Which one did you want to highlight?
Dragon Slayer 19. There was definitely a point where I was like, Sal, please just do some laundry. Your only guest needs towels, only to later go, because that made me kind of want to backtrack to this scene where their only guest at the time, he's kind of a regular. He's a business regular who stays for weeks on end. He comes in and he's like, hey kid, I need clean towels. And Sal is just like absolutely smacked with the loss of his mum. Like he can't even compute what the dude is saying. And he can't even digest the idea of going into the laundry room to get towels for the dude. So Noor shows up and sort of leads him away. But also the guest and Salah later have this conversation where the guest is like, hey, I'm sorry about your mom. I'm a God-fearing Christian. Because he's giving benign racism vibes, like very
he is racist
strong.
Coded. Yeah,
like he is racist, but he is not hateful. He's just super prejudiced, and he's like, yeah, I know your mom was brown and she was a Muslim, and I don't support that. I believe in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, but we came to an understanding, her and I. And we were good, and I'm good with you too, Sal. And it's like, yeah, okay, so he's trying to be a good guy, and then
it's very typical. It is a real guy you will meet who is like that, especially in more of the South, though they're not in the South, where it's like, I don't love the whole thing, but you as a person, you're pretty cool, and I'm like, I'm going to be cantankerous, but I also expect you to be a little cantankerous back to me about these things. It's a very real person, and I did appreciate that.
Yeah, and we get the scene where he's like, I'm a good guy, you're a good guy, we'll be good guys together. And then he leaves the motel, and Sal realizes that he has stolen from the motel. And it's just like a final kind of punch to the face. And it's just like, that is so real life. Like, people will steal. I have been a hotel clerk. And people will do things in hotels that you just won't believe. It's like all the social rules fall away and people reveal their true nature. Like they will smash the hotel rooms. They will smoke indoors. They will puke all over the bathrooms and they won't clean up. They'll stagger in at 2 a.m. and they'll use the downstairs guest bathroom and piss all over it before they go up to go to bed. They will abuse their wives in the hotels. There will be rape complaints. There will be rape.
And this isn't Sweden, guys.
121.
So
121 will. You have to edit. You have to bleep me.
It's okay. This far in, the YouTube algorithm usually doesn't care.
Okay.
But yes, which is very funny.
Yeah, and this is Sweden. We are a very polite and very socially repressed people, and people just act like pigs in hotels. So I was like, yes, I have met this hotel customer. He's like, he thinks he's a pretty good dude, and maybe he's not such a very bad dude, but let's go check if he stole the fixtures in the room.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, and we find out in flashbacks why Salahuddin's mother, Miss Beth, wanted a hotel, which is that when she's first speaking with her husband to be, she talks about wanting to run an inn and like gather everyone's stories from it, and she's the one who names the motel, and I forget what she names it, but it's supposed to be kind of poetic. It's something wind.
Cloud's Rest. It's a reference to what she and Abu talked about on their first date, because he liked books, so she asked him what he was reading as a way to sort of emotionally connect with him, and he told her, I'm reading this book, and it's in English. Because they were still in Pakistan then. So he was of a good family. He knew English. He could read books in English, and she was less comfortable with English.
He went to London and studied there for a time, I think.
Yes. So he showed her the first few pages of this book. And on the first page, the first paragraph is a description of a steamboat, I think. And in that description is the phrase, where the clouds rest. And she just thought it was so incredibly profound and beautiful. And she comments on how she had never felt that English was a beautiful language before, because their native tongue is it Urdu, is very rolling, or is it Punjabi?
I think it's Urdu.
Very musical and rolling, whereas English is kind of staccato and bulky and
which is just fucking rude.
Stuttering.
Very rude. I don't support that.
Yeah, that is definitely something you would never say, Will.
Me and Liv were literally
Never,
the other day
ever.
talking about how Spanish is so much more elegant of a language. Like anything you say in Spanish sounds soulful, and English is like it's kind of a mongrel language that gets the job done.
Yeah, I was trying to explain how some things work a lot better in Swedish as well, because words inherently have more meaning in Swedish than in English.
Japan is like that too, or Japanese is like that too, where there's a ton of small kind of jokes and meanings and nuances to like their poetry and literature, whereas English is just like 6 languages bashed together, and not necessarily in the most elegant manner. Right. And so her initial relationship with Abu, I thought that was a term of endearment his son uses, but I guess maybe that is his actual name. It's good and they get along well. And that was one of the things early on, I was like, oh, okay, so we see him as this drunk in the present, but he was a good guy in the past. And that adds a dimension and sympathy that I really appreciated. We find out that his mother is a drunk as well. She's an alcoholic and a pretty mean one at that. She, at one point says some very rude stuff to Ms. Beth. And so her and Abu, literally just leave the house. They move somewhere else, which is a little bit crazy culturally, I think. And she's very close with Abu's father and also her own father. They'll come and play and talk with them and stuff. And then what happens is that one day Abu's mother and father get electrocuted and die. And
Chris M is right. Abu is a title. It's not his name. His name isn't mentioned that much. If any of you guys remember what his given name is, please type it in the comments and help us out so we don't look dumb.
I was gonna say I thought it was a term of endearment, but I couldn't quite remember what his actual name was. And they die, and that's the moment when he starts drinking again, or for the first time, or she's not really sure. But it's a moment when like he deals with the real loss, and part of it is that he doesn't really have any extended family, which is very strange for their culture. Tufik.
His name is Tufik. Oh, so thank you, Dragon Slayer.
I'm gonna just keep calling him Sal's dad. And that's why they eventually go to America, is because he doesn't have any family tying him to Pakistan, and also everything in the city kind of reminds him of his parents. You
do get the sense that Tofik is a very emotional person, and that he's also very afraid. Like early on, he and Misbah have a conversation where he reveals that he has thought a lot about which of his parents he's gonna resemble more, and you get this feeling of dread that he's afraid of becoming his mother because she is not a good person. She is a bad drunk. She's a bad person, and she's a drunk.
A mean drunk.
And a mean drunk. And maybe not even very nice when she was sober. I kind of got that impression as well. Like, some people are just not very nice people, and drink makes it worse. Anyhow, and we get this, one thing that alcoholics and addicts often do is called geographical escape, where they try to run away from their issues by moving somewhere else and starting up new. And I thought that was a nice touch to how Tofik handles his parents' death. He feels like there's so much in this place that he can't deal with, and he feels... He gets drunk for the first time, and he probably feels the weight of his mother's legacy over him as well. So he decides they will emigrate and start a new life.
And this is one of the clear examples of generational trauma that we talked about as a theme, is that, his mother drank and then he drinks. And that's...
His mother drank and he was terrified of becoming like her. It was his personal nightmare, and then he dies.
Yeah. As we find out, though, he gets pushed into it essentially in a way that's very sympathetic. He really does have a very difficult life in certain ways. Yeah. Okay. So, and then they go and buy the hotel, and then somebody steals from them because white trash. And then in Noor's storyline, I really don't think almost anything. Oh, she's getting rejected from colleges, right? Because she's having to hide it. She's also not very good at writing. She doesn't really want to bare her soul in the personal essays, which we're told are the most important thing. She just doesn't want to talk about like how she was an orphan. We hear the refrain a couple of times, and the way the author brings it up is actually quite nice. That her uncle saved her. She has a specific way she tells the story to herself when she's trying to reassure herself that her uncle loves her, or she needs to obey him, and that her parents died in an earthquake, I think, as we said earlier, and like her uncle went and tried to dig through the ruins to try to find them, and he was really distraught, and he found her and then brought her back with him, which we'll understand the shadings of later. I initially really liked that because I was like, yeah, he's a mean guy, but he did have some nobility to him at some point. He wasn't always a bad guy.
I had this strong impression that he did this out of love for his family, and then the consequences of an earthquake and just society not being supportive of single parent households and such forced him to give up all his dreams, and that has bittered him over time, and that is sort of overflowing on Noor, who has her own emotional issues because of it. Like, she represses her emotions quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. And also just, it's hugely traumatic to lose all of your family. Like, the whole village is dead. And I felt like, yeah, he would feel that's something that would make him mean. Later on, we find out that, like, he didn't really want her from the beginning. He was like, he was upset that there was no one else to take her. And I didn't like that. I liked it better that he was someone who tried to do the right thing, and that crushed him under the weight of the system, which does not help single parents. Yeah, that's just something where I felt like that could have been a more interesting thematically if this had embittered him over time versus him kind of being a dick from the beginning. But that's a little bit up to interpretation.
Yeah, and I also felt like the book wanted to talk to kids who were in these kinds of situations. The book wanted to talk about how you can have a very big you can feel a big emotional debt to someone, and because of that, you can ignore their bad behavior. You can let them step over your boundaries. You can let them mistreat you. And the book wanted to talk about how angry and lonely that makes you.
That's actually a really good point. That's one of the moments where, like, this is a YA novel. It wants to draw a clear line. And it's not without nuance, Like, it really isn't. I just would have liked it to be, like, a little bit murkier and more... Yeah, again, that's just me wanting to be a little bit of a different book. What else? Basically...
she starts getting rejections from her universities because... we figure out, and this is a nuance I didn't fully catch, but she has, because of lack of parental guidance and such, she has applied to universities that she didn't really have that much chance getting into with her, both with her qualifications and the quality of her essays. So she really starts to panic, like emotionally. She's like, I'm never going to make it out of Juniper. This was my lifeline. And slowly it's failing me. And what shall I do now? Is there even any point in keeping on fighting? What do I do if I don't get in anywhere? What is my life then? And also we see her working at the liquor store.
Yeah. It's a very kind of typical teen kind of storyline of, like, college and trying to get out from your life and escape to a better place, which made it feel a little bit, I don't know, it just feels a little cliche to me. Like, there is a real reason for her to feel like this, and it does feel somewhat organic, but it also felt a little bit cliche to me. Yeah, her and Salahuddin are, like, still getting along pretty well. Oh.
They're edging back to becoming close friends again, and Salah is slowly, because the original reason why he rejected Noor was because she said she had feelings for him and she made her pass at him, and because he has touch issues, he got really scared and defensive that he could not give her what she wanted from him. And now that they're slowly easing back together, his feelings are slowly sort of building, and he starts feeling more emotionally close to her. Go on,
Yes.
Will.
And the other thing that is noticed is that because he is dealing drugs, his old girlfriend, Ashley, he was dealing drugs to her and she has an overdose. And it's a moment of like, what have you done? You know, you're doing bad things this way. Which, like, again,
because Ashley has a 2-year-old daughter as well, we should mention. So Salah feels really responsible that he was the one who sold Ashley the drugs, and he had previously thought to himself that this is a pretty bad thing I'm doing. She has a daughter who is depending on her, and I'm kind of seeing that she is not just in pain, because her pill addiction started with her having back pain after her labor. And then slowly she got hooked on them, and he kind of thinks about how he sees that she is in pain, but it's gone beyond the just physical, so she needs the pills for other reasons. And he thinks that what if I am responsible for Kaya becoming an orphan at the age of 2? Kaya is the daughter's name. So when this happens to Ashley, he runs to the hospital to see how she's doing, and they have this really awkward interaction because Ashley's mum is like, Salah is our family. He is my daughter's closest friend. Like you doctor person, you can't ask him to leave when we talk about my daughter, because he is my family, even if he's brown. She's a very nice person. She's making it very clear that, just because he's brown doesn't mean that he's not part of our family.
And there's a part where she's like, and if I find her drug dealer, I'm going to kill him. And he's like, well, and Yeah,
but also before that, the doctor wanted Salah to leave because he wanted to talk about how they found opioids in Ashley's blood. And the mother is kind of in denial at first. She's like, my daughter isn't a drug addict. She has back pain. And they're like, but she had OxyContin and diazepam in her blood.
I do not remember. I am a drug addict, but I don't remember what they're called. When I go to my dealer, I'm like, ring me up the glowy bang bang. And he's like, that's not a real term. And I'm like,
here we say boats. You want a boat?
Really?
Yeah, and that means some specific kind of pill, opioid. I don't remember which. I'm very afraid of drugs, guys.
No, she just abuses
never done
drugs.
anything.
Watches Joe Rogan a lot. Because for people who don't know, she has like a stable with horses and stuff.
That's a dig at Elon Musk, for those who don't know.
Also, yes, it was pretty obscure. Yeah, so I was about to say what happens with Noor. We haven't mentioned it, but at school, the kids are pretty racist. They just are like mildly racist. Well, not mildly. They're just like kind of racist in a way that I didn't feel was super real. But again, there is such a variance in the United States. I'm sure someone somewhere literally goes around calling people ethnic slurs. I was like, okay, there's a character who I would have disliked for how stereotypical she is, but the narrator gives her such a funny voice, such like a completely caricatured mean girl voice, that I was like, no, I'm here for it. This is hilarious. I forget what her name is, like Abby,
Jamie.
I think.
Jamie.
Huh? Jamie. Right. And she's just been bullying Noor the whole time, and Noor from the beginning is like, she's bullying me because she has a bad home life, but whatever. And she's going to get into a college, and she's annoyed that Noor might also get into a college. And she eventually just is super rude to Noor, and I think calls her like a camel jockey, and Nor punches
Fence
her.
jumping camel jockey.
Yeah, she starts going on about immigration, and I was like, I don't know that's really more
And
of
she
a
has this
Mexican
whole
thing.
spiel where she kind of plucks through Noor's backpack and she pulls out her old expired green card and it's like, "Oh my God, you're an illegal, Mrs. Teacher Person. Noor is in this country
She does talk like that.
illegally. We need to
It's so
report
funny.
her."
Yeah, and it was a little bit like, okay, again, I don't necessarily, I'm not an expert on this, but just from reading the book and the world the book has created, it felt a little broad and stereotypical. But
Yeah,
Nora
and
punches her.
it felt a bit ridiculous. I would preferred if we saw more people in the class behave sort of borderline way, because now it just comes off as Jamie is this full-on white supremacist racist, so much that it even makes other white sort of low-key racists feel uncomfortable around her, and that just seemed a little bit odd to me.
And the thing about it is that
she is that person on Facebook commenting on news where they say something has happened and they're like, those goddamn fence jumping camel jockeys, go home.
Yeah,
she's
and
the Facebook person.
It's not that necessarily that it's unrealistic, it just feels a little bit broad. And also what happens next is like,
you kind of feel like if the entire neighborhood, if the whole class, if this was just such a commonplace opinion, I could see how she would feel like this was a justified opinion to have. Like, if we saw her family being super racist, and if we saw the teachers just ignoring blatantly racist comments in school and such, it would feel less odd. But now it was just a bit like, holy hell.
And I think
became the mouthpiece of everything bad.
And I think the other thing is it starts splitting into, there are good people who aren't racist and there are bad people who are racist, which is just a little bit unsophisticated and leads to very black and white thinking. So like Ashley will come around and talk to Nora a couple times and she's like the cool white person. She's bi. She dated a brown guy. She's chill. Other white people don't like her because she's white trash. And it's like, okay, but again, you're beginning to subdivide the world into racists and not racists, and that's not quite how the world works. And what happens next, I think, is a good example of this, in that there's a police officer on campus. This is something Lindbergh probably also doesn't know, but that is actually extremely common, is for there just to be a security police guy on campuses. It's actually more of a problem in schools with more people of color, because it's called the school to prison pipeline. And it creates a criminalization of school behavior that otherwise might not be viewed as criminal. And he like immediately tackles. It's crazy. We're a crazy country. And he immediately tackles her. And but afterwards, he's actually very chill about the whole thing. He doesn't he's not racist. He's like, look, just apologize to her. I know you're a good kid. This will be okay. And that was something where I was like, no, the problem isn't so much people being personally racist as the system being racist against people. And so I would have liked to see that, where okay, now that she's in this system, she is going to be institutionally prejudiced against, more so than just a kid in her class being a bad person. I feel like that would have been a truer reflection of how racism works in the country. And we'll see that more later with the whole legal part that happens of this book.
Can you highlight a comment for me quickly?
Yes, which one?
KR said, yes, her choices were very unrealistic, but it was so unrealistic that it didn't feel believable. She seemed like a more thoughtful and hardworking person than her college picks would suggest. And I know, I read an interview with the author where she said that she purposely made her apply to these colleges because she wanted to show how, because she did this in secret against her uncle's wishes, she also avoided guidance counseling. She was not free to even research it at home on her computer. So she was kind of half operating in the dark, and she kind of just shot a little bit too high. And I think as as an immigrant, that isn't entirely unrealistic. I have the experience of being a Swede applying to British universities, and honestly, it was very difficult for me to estimate where I should apply to based with my credits, simply because I didn't fully know the system. And I think Noor was in a similar sort of situation, even if she had been living in America for 10 years.
Yeah, and to be honest, it's not even necessarily an immigrant thing. It's also just a first generation college thing. Though her uncle went to college, but she's not able to access that information. Of like, if you are a first generation college goer, you really don't know the rules in a lot of ways. There's a physicist called Angela Collier who does really funny video essays on physics and stuff. And she's from Appalachia, and sorry, my camera's having issues, guys.
Oh, is that the one you have sent to me?
Yeah, Angela Collier, she's really funny. But she was from Appalachia, a very poor portion of Appalachia, from what I understand. And she talks about like the difficulties of being a Oh my God, my camera has no chill, guys. I'm sorry, hold on. Okay. She talks about the challenges of being like a first generation person entering college and like how weird that can be.
Why are you so far down now?
Because my camera has this thing where the thing that actually holds the camera can't really isn't very firm. So like, okay, hold on. There we go. That's better. Okay.
We're professionals here, guys. We have the best.
I was gonna say first generation video recording. And so, yeah, no, it's true. That is a kind of again, I would have liked if maybe like at some point somebody else looked at her application and was like, why did you do this? This is a terrible idea. And she had been like, well, I didn't know. Like, that would have been a nice thing if the novel acknowledged it.
Yes, it would have been clearer to the reader. It would have been a way to say that you're feeling this. We know it. You're right. Yeah. That was the point.
There's also a point where, so Chris M says, and I think this is a later point, there was a female cop who wasn't racist and wasn't bad, but that might be because her name was Ramirez, so she probably second generation or something. And the thing about it is that is actually, again, another example of where the book kind of immediately assumes there's going to be a certain amount of solidarity among brown people. That is not the case. It's like a well-known thing that black cops are very they're not nice to other brown people. It's not like they're like, okay, we're buddies, we'll get you off. Like, no, they actually have to be even more harsh because, again, they view themselves as like, I have to be part of this culture and show I'm part of the police culture and racist. What's going on? You are muted.
No, I'm just mouthing. I didn't want to talk over you.
Oh, okay.
Jukebox to go. Will and his tripod, Maria and her autofocus, and Katie and her racist camera. Hashtag iconic.
You know, it's the tech works against us in insidious ways. Okay. But anyway, yeah. So, but she refuses. This is the part of the book where she'll start being like, oh, I couldn't control my rage anymore. And I read an interview from the author talking about the reason it's called All My Rage is because it's like that you were beaten down so much that rage boils up in you. And like that just didn't feel organic to me. Like I get it conceptually, but organically to me, it didn't really make sense that all of a sudden she has this anger is bubbling up when it hasn't really been shown through the book up until that point.
Yeah, and I also felt like she was too contextualizing the rage to herself because she actually thought the words, oh, my rage bubbles up. And that just felt a little bit inorganic to me. I would have preferred it if we were shown how she struggles to push her anger down, but the anger is intangible. So she just struggles to control her emotions and not react when things don't go her way, and how slowly she loses a bit more control because finally she does have a big explosion that's going to happen after a scene that we're going to discuss in a moment, where you can actually see the rage on page. Like you don't have to say it is rage, you see it happening, and that would have been more impactful than Noor thinking about her rage.
Yeah, that was my feeling as well on it. Was like it felt a little bit informed and a little bit of the author. This is something she planned beforehand and didn't necessarily alter it, even though she didn't quite build up to it properly. That
It
happens
felt
a
like
lot
the
of
author
books.
was like, this is my theme of the book, and
Yeah.
I'm going to have to make it clear. And she made it just a little bit too clear. And since I am a very adult woman, maybe I think it was too clear, but maybe a child, teen audience. I'm so sorry. I
Teens.
didn't mean to belittle anyone. In case we have any teens who ever see this, I'm sorry. Teens who watch this, maybe you appreciated it. Maybe it helped you put a word to your emotions in a way that it just didn't for me, because I'm older and more emotionally jaded.
I mean, I think it's, again, something where she's maybe dumbing it down a little bit for a YA audience, or she doesn't necessarily...
Yeah, but the question is,
you know?
was it successful? It wasn't successful for us, but we are millennials. Was it successful
Yes!
for the target audience?
No.
That would be interesting to know, actually.
Yeah, but also you can just write better. Like, kids will pick up on better writing. They'll adapt to meet the challenge.
It's not a UTT episode if Will doesn't at least one time in a very loud voice proclaim, write better.
Look, I that is my feelings on the matter. I feel like you should always write better than write worse. I will never say, I think standards are a good thing, and I think we should shame people for not meeting them. That's how I feel.
Please. Do a screen capture where you're like, write better.
Okay, and the other thing that we find out at about this point, and I didn't feel like this was well integrated into the novel in terms of the three storylines telling each other, because you kind of figure out this big secret about Salahuddin, and then like nothing. We then cut to a Noor chapter, and it's like, well, why weren't we told this before? But anyway, the reason that, and we get told this through a Mizbeth chapter, the reason Salahuddin has so many intimacy issues is that as a child he was molested. We're pretty sure anyway, and they never found the guy, and it was something that was really difficult for his parents, and it's the moment that his father started drinking and didn't stop. And the key point
is this in her point of view.
Yeah, and the key point is that Mizbah is told, like, he will not remember it consciously, but his body will remember it. And so that's something that he's going to struggle with all his life. And he doesn't know this in the present. He knows something happened, but he doesn't really know what.
The body can remember a trauma that the mind has suppressed as a defense mechanism. Or simply because he was too young to process it intelligently. Like, he was 6 at the time, and people at the age of 6 will have a very arbitrary sense of, they still see adults as sort of bastions of truth and what is correct behavior. So when adults abuse young children, it creates a dichotomy in the child where this person who shows me what life is supposed to be is now doing something that felt bad for me, and what does that mean? And often it becomes a trauma that can't be emotionally processed efficiently.
Yeah, and it's such an intimacy trauma at such a young age that it really shatters your sense of being. And I thought this was, it was interesting. I didn't necessarily, and you know, I'm appreciative that this was shown. This is not a thing that's often shown with characters to have had this kind of trauma, and it's especially not often shown with male characters because it's felt to be so demasculating, really, that a lot of people just don't a lot of male authors, I think, don't want to approach it and don't want to touch it because it makes them feel emotionally uncomfortable in a way that they don't necessarily feel uncomfortable writing that about women. And that's
and in books as well, you would usually see female characters struggle with touch because they have been through these types of experiences. I really appreciate the choice.
Yeah, I think it's a good choice. I think what happens with it, I'm less I think we'll talk about it when we get there. But I did think it was an interesting thing to include.
Yeah, in a little way, there
Valuable.
comes a certain point in the book where you're like, these are maybe a few too many things. Like, why is every shitty thing happening to these kids within the
really
span
funny.
of a couple of months?
Mm-hmm.
Even though Sal's trauma didn't happen within the couple of months, it's like, haven't these kids been through enough?
Yeah, it's kind of piling on. And the other thing is, this is not
Yeah.
told at a time where like it makes us see Sal in a new point of view. So, for example, we talked about this in The Troop, where the plot line's telling you what's happening with the science experiment, the evil science experiment. It gives you information right before the kids run into something, which then makes it even more horrific what they run into. So the two are playing well against each other. This is just kind of told at this point because you couldn't tell it early on because it was a reveal. But like, it doesn't inform you more about Salahuddin, and by this point he's beginning to actually heal from this, essentially, because him and what's her face are making out, Noor, and so like I think it's valuable to include. I don't necessarily think she integrated it as well as she could have, but also I don't think it's a knock against the book. I don't think it's like mishandled or anything like that.
No, I feel like it could have been used a little more effectively, but I still really appreciate that she wanted to talk about this and that she made such a strong, intelligent, sympathetic character as Sal struggle with these things. And we see him still being a very masculine young man. Like, he's very secure in himself. He treats women well. He doesn't feel like the world is a threat to his masculinity in a sense. And it's just nice that he can have these struggles at the same time. And I hope that there were kids reading this who felt like they were seen.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think yeah. No, I think it was very valuable to include. The other thing that happens about this point is that we find out that Noor has being abused by her uncle, like physically, which we knew up until this point because she had bruises, and anytime a character has bruises, that means they're being abused at home. And so, but the thing is, you've been in Noor's point of view this whole time, so you're like, it's one of those reveals that doesn't work great in first person because, like, why didn't she think about this before now? Kind of a thing.
I will be honest. The first time I read this book, I cried so hard when we found out that, because Noor spends so much time thinking, Chachu saved me. He dug with his hands through the rubble. Everyone was dead except me, and he took me with him. I really appreciate that we see her holding on to this idea that is the one thing that keeps her going when the person who should be taking care of her and who should be valuing her and who is her family, like her safe place in the world, is abusing her. I felt like that it was kind of realistic that you pick these things, that you need to believe for yourself. You need to believe them. Otherwise, you don't know how to live with yourself and with the situation.
I agree. I just think that to treat it as a reveal is disingenuous. I'm fine with her thought process and everything, but it should have. I felt like, okay, just tell us. Like, you it's that thing in like The Thief we read or whatever,
true.
where like the viewpoint character isn't telling you a thing that they should be thinking about all the time. And so I was like, okay, all right.
True. It would have been more effective to just show the scene where Chachu loses it and hits her before we go to Misbah kind of figuring it out and Sal beginning to figure it out by seeing bruises. That would have just have hit a little bit harder. So it's really the order of things and how it's being done.
Yeah, I felt like those two things, the abuse Noir is going through and the abuse that Sal did go through, should have just not been reveals. They should have just been told to us earlier so that we knew. But again, it's not a massive problem. I just think structurally it would have worked better that way. But she gets beat up and she decides to go away with Sal to like the desert where they're like, because now Sal knows she's being abused and they have a romantic interlude that was like, it's very hurt comfort. But the thing about it is there's a certain extent to which I expected the book to be a little bit more realistic and a little less shippy about it. I expected the book to be like, well, no, she just got abused. This is not the time for her. It's not necessarily a healthy reaction to start making out with the boy you've had a crush on this whole time, because like hypersexuality and wanting to that kind of thing, like act out in that way, is actually a very typical thing of abuse victims. And so like there's a certain extent to which it's I felt like, okay, the conventions of the book are kind of the story you want to write, and shipping your characters are stepping a little bit on what would be a more realistic emotional reaction. But I get it. She wants to write the people she likes in her head kissing, like as Val always says. And so that was kind of...
In a way, I felt like, because Sal, he shows up and he's like, I'm gonna kill Chachu, like I'm gonna fucking kill him, and I'm gonna drive you to the hospital. We're gonna get you to the hospital. You're hurt, Nor. And she's like, no, we will have a problem if you drive me to the hospital. I absolutely don't want that. I don't even want to talk about Chachu. I don't want you to do anything. And I'll be honest, for me, that instinct to protect the person who is hurting you, because they're someone you have a relationship with, it was very genuine. And the wish to escape it was very genuine, but maybe it just became a little over the top with her just having been beaten to a pulp.
Yeah, and to then have that kind of not a heel face, but that kind of a pivot, I felt was like a little bit more tropey. It's not wrong. It's just not exactly what I would have liked from a book that otherwise is so emotionally raw. But it's fine. But anyway, on the way to the hospital, they get stopped by some cops and they get searched for drugs, and there's a bunch of drugs in the car. So both her and Salahuddin are taken to jail, and she is like heartbroken that he lied to her about not selling drugs. And at jail, this is another point. Well, no, it's fine for now. Anyway, there was the Muslim imam that she saw a couple of times. His wife is a lawyer, so she takes on her case pro bono, and Sal's dad gets him out of jail. And has them with like a lawyer. And then this is like the next third of the book is like the two of them dealing with going through the criminal justice system while not getting along particularly well. Because she's like, oh no, you betrayed me. And he's like, I know, I suck. So the whole time I had been wondering, how is this book going to handle him selling drugs? Because from a basic storytelling perspective, selling drugs is not good. So in the narrative, he needs to come to terms with that. But at the same time, I was like, if he gets caught, which is the thing that would be the best way of dealing with those stakes, like he's going to get shuffled into jail, and that's real dark for a story like this. And that is going to be pretty much what happens. And I don't feel like this is really a great way to tie up that storyline, because the realism of like the American criminal justice system is crazy to deal with in this situation, because he's in prison for a bit and they get him out. And how much do you want to describe what happens before they actually get to the sentencing? Because I would just kind of skip there. I don't remember any of the emotional things that happen. They're just kind of...
Well, first, I just want to comment on KR's comment, especially with Noor not trusting people to love her when her reaction to trauma is kissing her crush. It makes it seem like this assumption thing she's giving to him to ensure their relationship. I thought that was a really interesting comment, actually.
I think that would be really interesting if it was acknowledged by the text. Like, to me, that's a very interesting thing, but I don't think you're supposed to read the text that way, and it's not ever really like that isn't expanded on later in the book. It's just kind of like
You're in Norse. We're in Norse POV when this happens, isn't it? No, we're in Sal's POV actually.
Well, it switches back and forth, I think.
So that is a good nuance. As I recall it, Noor is not very much thinking in those terms herself at the time, but it is still a really interesting reflection. And Sal and Noor kind of stops them when they start making out as well. And it's never said that she does this because she is kind of dealing with emotional betrayal and complicated feelings around love and affection. But that is certainly a nuance to it. I mean, that would be very common. It would be very common for people who have not experienced love given freely, that they feel like they need to do things to earn love.
Yeah, and also that like that is maybe the only way she really knows how to connect. And I that goes back to the whole, this is kind of the 101 level of these issues, not the 102 level, which is kind of more of what I wanted. Surprised that Will doesn't remember his favorite character, Jamie, got her comeuppance for being openly racist. The only bad character faced consequences in the book. I actually didn't love that as an ending, because they find out at graduation she gets canceled for somebody recorded her saying racist stuff to Noir. And like that gets spread out and the colleges are like, we don't want that bitch here anymore. And to me, that felt like kind of
that was definitely one of the points where it was like, oh, so many things. And also kind of like Sabaa suddenly thought that, oh, this is modern day. Oh, social media. Oh, social media hate trains. Oh, and people putting things on the internet and it leading to terrible consequences for them, like saying something racist gets you fired from your job. And this happens to Jamie suddenly. And it just felt like...
And also portraying it as like a being canceled as like an unmitigated, not even just canceled, a teenage girl being canceled is like kind of a crazy view of like justice confirmed. You know what I mean?
It's like, not really a win. It didn't feel like a win because all the colleges she had been accepted to were expected to reject her now because she said this thing. And while I think that is not entirely unrealistic, because colleges care a lot about their image, their public image, like it's more important how things seem than how they really are. That isn't a slay. I'm sorry. It isn't a slay, especially not when it happens to a woman who has not committed a crime. Like, she is not a nice person, but she hasn't actually done something that is so bad.
That's the thing about it, is that the punishment does not fit the crime. Really what this should be is like that gets revealed and everybody in high school shuns her or something like that, or her social circle turns on her.
The teachers find out and she's not made valedictorian.
Yeah, that is a more like reasonable than let's ruin her future. Like, it's just one of these things that doesn't quite match and again feels a little bit broad.
Yeah, and maybe Sabaa kind of thought that, because she's a white woman, she from a good family, she's gonna have future anyway, so it's less of a tragedy. But that is also something the book never talks about.
Yeah, the book isn't like, well, this was a win for the moment, but actually she'll be fine. Like her family will, give them a library or something like that. There's all this stuff with...
I'll say it was effective in one sense, that as Dragon Slayer comments, it really made me think the trial would go differently because of that setting of the table. I'll say that was actually rather effective in that it set our expectations for Sal's and Noor's trial to be, really heavy. Like you were scared that they would both go down for this, and that just the upset I have for Noor's sake, that she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and everyone is kind of deciding that she was the bad person, like she was the worst. She was trafficking drugs from the hospital she worked at, and she kind of pulled Sal into this, even though she was beaten to a shit when the cops pulled her in.
It's okay. So what happens is realistically what should happen, right, is what does happen initially, which is that everyone's like, oh, you're dealing drugs with him. He's your boyfriend. He's beating you up. And that plays into risk. What is it? It's too self-indulgent of a punishment.
No,
like something
no,
of a
Kristen, yes, Lindbergh, you're finally getting with the young kid vernacular.
Oh, so it's one of these things where it's like, okay, initially they think he's beating her. That makes sense. It's a racist view the cops would have. But the problem is that later the author wants to have the stakes be Salahuddin needs to sacrifice himself to get her off the hook for his crimes to redeem himself, which is fine. But those two things don't play together then. You can't, she switches from one to the other in a way that's very inorganic, because it's why all of a sudden is it her that is at fault. And so that didn't quite work for me, because that's what happens. Salahuddin goes up after his lawyer was like, it's her fault. And he's like, I have a statement to read. I sold drugs. It has nothing to do with her. And the judge is super impressed by this and is like, you're a good kid, man. I think you have a good life ahead of you. We're looking at the charges. You could get 7 years. We're going to give you 2. 18 with good behavior. And yeah, he goes to prison. And again, this goes back to me being like, how is the author going to get out of this without sending him to prison? And she does. And that part doesn't really work for me, because all of a sudden we're spending a year and a half with him in prison, away from her. It's kind of one of these things where it's like, it's not, it's a punishment that doesn't quite fit the crime, but also realistically, this is still too nice of what would happen to him. This is a place where the institutional racism would hit. He would be in jail for much longer. He would come out with a record and never really be able to work again. Like, this is where the really racist part of the system would hit and cause problems, more so than like his classmates asking him if he's having curry or whatever.
Okay, well, as his crime is obviously a pretty severe crime. Like, drugs cost people's lives. It is one of the dirtiest, but also one of the most economical profitable. Sorry.
Yes.
I'm Swedish. You'll have to excuse me. It's one of the most profitable businesses in the world. And even if you're just a kid trying to make ends meet and such, it is a very bad mistake to make. And people did get hurt because of it. And there's so many ingredients to this. Like, obviously, like you say, well, it feels like obviously she can't send him to prison. That would just be, this is a YA novel.
Well, and also it suddenly ruptures. Like, that's such a massive, that should be a book on its own, right? Of having to go to jail and live in jail. Like, that's a really big thing. You can't just skip over that. And she kind of does. He should be a fundamentally different person when he comes out.
To me, it felt like one of those points where Sabaa was like, hey kid, you've made bad decisions in your life and now you're ending up in trouble and it might feel like the end of the world for you, but there can be a life beyond this. It feels like where she wants to talk to someone who is struggling and has done something bad and make them not give up on themselves. But also, in doing that in this way, in this book with this setup, you also kind of feel like that it just isn't entirely realistic that the judge would go this easy on him. In reality, it's not really, it doesn't feel entirely genuine that so long as you admit your mistake and take responsibility for it, you'll get out of 3/4 of your prison time.
Judges are absolutely awful to young men of color. Like, they just are. Like, that is one of the more unrealistic things, is that the judge is like, you're a good kid, man. Or like, even that they would care. Like, so, and as Dragon Slayer says, wait, are you saying prison isn't a place where you need to slightly toughen up, but mostly just spend time contemplating your mom's last words to come to terms with its meaning? Because, yeah, that is kind of how it's treated, is like, he just goes to jail and, he kind of just reads books, and it's like, that's not the reality of American jail, or actually prison, technically, I think, because he would be in
And he
prison
just
after.
happens to get the guy he was in
Yeah.
lockup with as his cellmate, so he doesn't
Chill
have to
Hispanic
worry
guy.
about being beaten or assaulted or pulled into even more criminal activity. And it's like it ties up a little too neatly, but I also
Yeah.
kind of see why she wanted to do this. So it's a meh.
It's yeah, again, it's a kind of like a, because the thing is, from the stakes of the story, it would feel unrealistic if he didn't, once he gets caught with drugs, it's unrealistic that if he doesn't go to jail.
And hard drugs as well. He gets caught with some serious shit.
Yeah, exactly. So like you could have played it more of like a I don't know, Art turns himself in and says, "Oh, it was all on me," so he just gets community service for like 3 years and probation or something. Like there's a way to maybe
Sal
make it
just deal heroin or fentanyl,
or he gets caught, but it's like with like a thimble full, and they're able to get him somewhat off on a technicality. But it's just like, again, that he doesn't spiral into drugs in jail is crazy. The fact that and again, it's actually prison, which is worse because he would be there for a while, and like he gets a good cellmate, and like the American prison system is oh, this is the thing I have to explain to I don't know. It was a joke I was going to do, but you actually do understand about how horrific like if he had gone to Swedish jail, I would have been like, oh, that's perfect ending to this.
If he had gone to Swedish jail, he would have been finishing school, he would have applied to and been accepted to university, and he would have graduated with savings because he would have worked while he was in prison. So he would have graduated with an education and some money. And I'm not saying that criminals don't have a hard time after they make it out in Sweden. I am not saying that employers don't discriminate, but we do have policies that this isn't supposed to happen. We have policies that say that we want to reintegrate criminals into society. We believe that that is something that benefits our society as a whole, and then people don't always fulfill every step of that aspirational ladder.
Yeah.
But we talk a lot about how awful and how self-enacting prison is in America. It usually starts with you going down for something smaller, and then while you're in prison, you're forced to make even more bad decisions, and you're forced to commit more crimes, and you learn all the wrong skill sets, and you make all the wrong contacts, and then when you get out, it's traumatic. You come out a much worse person through no fault of your own, even if you wanted to be better after prison.
And guess what? Now it's harder to get a job. Yeah, and now it's way harder to get a job.
Yeah, and now you're kicked out, you have no money, no one wants to know you, no one wants to hire you, everyone judges you for being a poor person who maybe had to commit crime to get by, and now you're tainted.
It's so like that's not the way for him to face his crime. To get his moral comeuppance is not go to American jail. And I actually think it's actually problematic to portray jail as like a healing thing or a comeuppance where he's facing his like, that's not American jail. That is a view of American jail that some Americans have, but it is not the reality of it, and portraying it as the reality is a bit of a propaganda kind of thing.
I would have preferred it if it was portrayed as a really hard, really terrible experience, but Sal kind of pulling through because he has something to live for, he has something to work for, he has family and friends waiting for him when he comes out. So he doesn't necessarily lose all hope while he's going through this trauma.
But that would have been then needed to be like a sequel or a bigger book. And so like I think she should just not have had him be caught for drugs. Like there should have just been something more of a social kind of comeuppance. But while
Yeah,
he's doing that,
maybe Noor could catch him with his drugs, and it would become like a between them issue, and he would have to sort of take responsibility and quit doing it,
mm-hmm.
or something like that.
Yeah, or yeah, that kind of a thing, or if there was or even just the Ashley thing is him going like, okay, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah,
something like that. I think would have
maybe
been.
Ashley's mum did find out that he was the one who sold the pills to Ashley.
Yeah, that would have been a good.
But then she would turn him in, wouldn't she? But she just said he was their family,
Yeah.
and since Ashley made it, maybe we could.
Well, and also to be honest, if she turns him in, that's not necessarily him getting jail time. Like that's much more tenuous than finding a bunch of drugs in your car.
Yeah, that's true.
So
that's true. A whole bunch of hard drugs as well.
Yeah. So yeah, and this whole time Nora's at college and she has like a cool roommate who's Asian who likes books, so she sends him books throughout the whole time. She doesn't come visit, which is again a thing where like they've shown that like prisoners become much less violent if they have at least like one or two family members visit them regularly. Like it's actually very cruel of her not to visit him. But then at the end, he goes back to his mom's grave and she's... Oh, no. We forgot the dumbest part of this book, which is while he's in prison, he starts writing his mom's life story as an actual story because he needed to for a writing competition. This whole time, he's been very talented. And this led me to be really annoyed because it made me think for a while that what we had been getting of Mizbeth between the chapters was him writing, like we were reading his writing, and I was like, that cheapens it so much because like I liked her so much, it felt so authentic, and it's just pulling the rug out from under you. It's a betrayal of who you thought she was. But Lindbergh doesn't think that's what happened.
You messaged me and said that I felt it was such a cop out that he was writing it, her perspective all along, and that really cheapened it for me. And I looked like this. Because I had no memory of this. And then when I re-listened to these bits, I suddenly started piecing together why you got this impression. But my take, and guys in the comments, if you read this book, give me your takes. What do you think about this? My takeaway was that Sal was in prison, was just processing the trauma of his mother's death, and he was thinking about what he had learned, she said, to Noor as she died. And he was kind of just writing the story of why Misbah did not go to dialysis, why she hid just how bad their financial situation was, why she wasn't more open with his father's alcoholism, why she tried to cushion Sal so much because the backlash of it became so bad when Misbah died. And I think Misbah's point of view was Misbah's story, and that Misbah is kind of like the whole overarching person who ties all these people together, and that story of her life is sort of both the prequel, the interlude, and the summation of this story of what parents might have to do, the traumas we go through, and how we want our children to have better situations than we did growing up, and, you know, how we just want them to be happy and loved and to live a better life. And I thought that Misbah is telling us her story. She is kind of like an invisible narrator from beyond death who's looking down at us, because she tells us about things that we never hear Sal learning of, that it just seems strange that Sal would be writing these intimate details about her history and her dates with Tawfiq, and also Sal never finds out exactly what happened to him, because he talks with his pediatrician. She visits him in jail once, and she's like, Sal, I felt like I messed up a little bit that time we talked in the hospital, because something actually happened to you. And I have now learned that your mother never got you into therapy. She never revealed what you had been through. And even if your mind does not remember, your body obviously remembers, because I hear you've been having touch issues and such. So I want to tell you what it is now, so that you can get into therapy and start processing it. And Sal says to her that I don't need to know. You're right. My body remembers that something traumatic happens, but my mind does not remember it. And I would rather go on living this way. And to deal with the situation I have now, I won't be made happier or more understanding by just learning what happened. But in Misba's POV, she talks about what happened in the laundry and who did it and why it never became a legal issue. So I took it as Misba telling us her story and Sal just writing his own stuff and processing it. And maybe there's overlap and it ties together, but I think Misba's story really was her telling the story. And that's why we get her chapter as the last chapter of the book, where she sees her prophecy having come true, her 2 children and her 3rd child, the motel, and how she has failed all of them. The motel gets sold to another young couple, and she failed Sal in that he had to commit crime to support his father. He wasn't at all prepared.
I don't think she failed them. I fundamentally disagree with that stupid fortune teller. I like Misbeth. I think she did the best she could, and they came out the other side. I actually, joking aside, I do think thematically it's a little weird to treat it as though she failed them. It should have been something where it's like, she failed them, but she gave them the tools to succeed, kind of a thing.
I think you're being a little too literal, because I think that the failure is a feeling of Misba's. She feels like she failed them all. And in this last chapter, we see her accepting, and we see her seeing that, oh, I made mistakes, but I also did good things, and they have each other. I brought them together and they have each other now, and they're going to be okay. So I can let go of my life.
I agree. I think that would be really beautiful if she had said that, or if the fortune teller. It's just, I don't think the book ever really acknowledges that or posits that. I would have liked if the fortune teller had been like, you will have 3 children, and at the end of your life, you will have failed them. And Ms. Bell goes, yeah, at the last moment, I did fail them, but before that, I brought them together. I raised them as best as I could. It's okay for me to go now. Like, something like that, I think would have been interesting.
But it could also be that the prophecy was kind of true, but also not true in the end. Like, that could also be a thematic thing, that, oh, maybe you failed in one sense, but you succeeded in other senses.
But she never thinks about it. She doesn't think about the prophecy at the end, when she's like going up to see her dad. But like
we do, I do.
But she's the character. Like, she is supposed to. We're supposed to identify with her and relate to her, and she's supposed to kind of have the thoughts and ask the questions that we have. Like, and so like, I don't think you're wrong. And also, to be fair, I also now kind of think like, oh, okay, the author did mean it to be that these were Misba's stories all along, and Sal wasn't telling them. I just don't think she communicated that well in the actual story. Yeah, and so like this is one of those books where like I think there's actually a lot that you could read into it, but I'm not sure how much of it is actually there, and I would have liked to see some of it explored more.
I'm showing my bias here because I love it when a book just sets up ideas and then lets you sort of puzzle out what happened and what it meant, and if it meant anything at all. I'm a philosopher, so I like there being questions more than I like there being answers.
Okay, so there's a difference between posing questions with ambiguous answers that you're supposed to think over and just being unclear. And I feel like this book isn't as just unclear as a lot of books that we've read. I do feel like there is a certain amount to which you're kind of supposed to think and answer these things yourself, but like, I do think at times it could just be clearer. Like, just like a sentence or two all of a sudden.
Yeah, we could have tied it back to the prophecy. You're right. Yeah, we could have done that, and we wouldn't have had to give a clear answer to the prophecy. We could have just brought it back up so that it contextualizes in the reader's minds.
Yeah, or even just like it makes it explicit that it's posing a question of like, what does fail mean if they're doing well now?
Yeah, because what does fail mean?
Yeah,
what does it mean?
So So the other thing I need to mention, because this is already going, oh my god, this is already going long. I don't like this ending for Sal and his trauma. I think it is really weird, because first of all, knowing these things is important. It's also something where it doesn't really match generational trauma because it was just a random guy who did it. So that's like a theme that I felt like could have been tied in better.
Does it say in the premise for the book that this is a book about generational trauma?
No, but you have made that argument, and other people have made the argument that that's the main theme of the book. So I'm saying, in terms of a sustainable reading and the themes, that's not really there. But also, I just feel like to get to the point with your own trauma where you go, I have trauma, I don't know why it does all these things, it must be something wrong with me. And then for somebody to come to you at the end, and then for somebody to come at the end and be like, I can tell you why you have this trauma, and you to go, no, it doesn't matter where it came from. I know where it is, where I am now. I don't feel like we quite got that journey from Sal. Like his journey is not realizing his trauma. It doesn't matter where his trauma came from. His journey is like, oh, I need to take responsibility for my actions in drug dealing. Like, it feels a little confused in that way.
Well, he had already accepted responsibility for that, sort of.
No, I know, but I'm just saying I think it needed to be a bigger part of the book. Like, deciding not to know where your trauma comes from exactly is kind of it's a big decision.
Let's say it like this. If you had, if
like,
someone came,
I disagree.
Yes, I do, because why would you want to be told about a horrible trauma that you don't remember at the moment? Because if someone told you that, oh, this happened, and from that point, you would have to have this bad feeling in your body, and you would always have to ask yourself, why doesn't I remember? And then you would start to remember things, and you're like, is this real? Is it not real? And I can easily see how someone would just not want to know. It's the same way when someone's partner is cheating. Some people want to know, and other people, they don't want to know because it would be a trauma for them.
I agree, but I think that is a journey to get to that an 18-year-old would have to have throughout a book. Like that is a very mature way of viewing the world of like, there's certain things it's better not to know. Whereas I don't think as an 18-year-old, it's likely he's going to go, and who Sal is throughout the book, he would be like, peace, I don't care. Like, I feel like he would want to know, or if he didn't want to know, it would be out of a certain amount of fear. And that was not the impression that the book gives. Very quickly, Chris M says, she felt like she failed them, but she didn't actually fail them because failure success implies an amount of control over situations that's impossible for a person. I would have loved that as a theme. I think that's really cool. I think that could have tied into things about systems over people. And she could have realized like, oh, I died not because I worked too hard, but because the system failed me, or something like that. I think that would be an interesting theme.
Personally, I feel like we can come to that conclusion ourselves.
Going easy on the book, Lindbergh.
No, I just feel like we clearly see why she doesn't go to dialysis, because they don't have insurance and they have no money, and this is the USA. That is one thing.
I agree. I'm just saying that would have been an interesting way to change the book to reflect that theme. I'm not saying that in the text itself right now it was like that.
No, but if Misbah's last chapter would have had to be like her talking to the reader and saying, oh, I didn't fail my kids, it was a systematic failure and I did my best, then that is the author just giving you the conclusion. I think you can still get all of that from the book without it having explicitly said.
I would have liked the question to be a little more clearly posed. How about that?
Fair.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Oh, and then the book ends with the two of them making out after he gets out of prison. And apparently we're not going to talk about the fact that he now has a criminal record that will make it so that it's impossible for him to almost
that was a bit.
And his father probably bankrupted himself paying for lawyers. Yeah. So,
it was a bit funny. And we never learn if Tawfiq stayed sober and what happened with him. We don't learn what Sal comes out to.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
Oh,
Tawfiq, I think.
he mentioned that Tawfiq is struggling, but he has started working again. Actually, yeah.
Yeah, but he's working the system, which again I liked that throughout the book he just keeps quitting and then not quitting because that's very realistic. We also hear that like her uncle beat her stepmom and got charged with assault or whatever, and then she dropped he's still fine, like she dropped the charges or whatever, which again felt very like realistic to me in terms of like, yeah, this it's very difficult for those people to stay in jail. Val says air horns Linny. Yeah, that's our other
Hey,
intern
Val.
for those who don't know. She's late, which is why she was not invited. I'm just kidding.
She's in California, so this is quite early in the morning for those of you who don't know. So William is just being a little bit bitchy about it.
What would this podcast be without that? Overall, I thought this was a good book. It's not quite the book I wanted to read, but I don't think that's necessarily the fault of the book. I think that I think it was enjoyable to read. Yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was fine. I thought it was good, but not great. And it kind of confirms my thesis that sometimes writers need to shift genres. Like the genres that they normally write are not the ones they're good at. Even things like the dialogue in this book felt more realistic than Ember in the Ashes. And obviously, I know Ember in the Ashes was like 7 years before this. But it shows she can change at least a little bit as a writer, and I think that's kind of cool. I would be interested in I was going to say in reading one of her newer fantasy books, but that's actually not true. I know it would be bad.
Well, unfortunately, she has kept writing in the Ember of the Ashes universe.
Has she?
If she writes more, what's the term for this? Yes, if she writes more contemporary fiction, I will read it. I will gobble it up. I will eat it. I just want to highlight Dragon Slayer's comment. If he refused to hear the trauma as part of the beginning of the second part of the book, where he's dealing with the prison system and doesn't want to know the weakness about himself, that might work better. That could be a valid reason for not wanting to process this kind of trauma at this point in life.
Mm-hmm.
But the book doesn't acknowledge this, so you would have to kind of assume that's what he's doing. That would have been a very valid reason not to want to hear about it when your old pediatrician visits you in prison.
I mean, that's the thing, is like being in prison is its whole own character arc. And it can't be treated as just the end of another, like the capstone of another character arc that already happened. And so that's why I feel like, again, I don't think it's a great decision on her part. But no, what were your overall thoughts on the novel?
For me, also, the arc ending with them not being in active contact over the time in prison, and Noor kind of being at university and moving on with her life and dating other people, I kind of question how that would make them feel emotionally closer to each other. I do get that sometimes absence breeds fondness, like the heart grows fonder when you're apart.
Yes, that's the saying.
But as a young teen, the opposite is just as likely to happen. I would have liked it if Noor made a more conscious effort to forgive Sal and to start reconnecting with him, rather than her just realizing one day after she has kissed some other boy that, I never want to kiss another boy again, I just want Sal. And Sal just coming out and meeting her and just instantly being like, smoochy, smoochy. That felt a little young and a little naive for me, but I don't mind it at all. I think that this book is, for a YA book, it is an appropriate YA book, and it does make some decisions that are very YA that might be digestible for a younger audience in a way that it isn't for me. And I don't count that as a negative for the book necessarily. Like, yes, I would also like it if the book addressed things on a higher level, if it viewed these things as generational racism, internalized racism, prison complex law, jurisdictional racism. That's the word I'm looking for. In a more in-depth way, that would have been a very interesting.
Or institutionalized.
Yeah. That would have been a very interesting book, and I would very much have liked to read it. But that isn't what this book wanted to be. It's not trying to be that.
I think that's a good point, because I would
won't
hand
hold
this.
it against it. I think it's a really sweet YA book with sympathetic, realistic characters that you do end up rooting for. I think there is there are nice ideas about how people want to do the best for themselves and their family, and how that isn't always easy, and how sometimes life gives you some serious lemons, and maybe you don't always make the right decision, maybe you don't always handle it the best way, but it doesn't need to make you a bad person.
Yeah, I
That
agree with
said,
that.
we we had a few too many ingredients. Maybe we could have tied it up neater if we didn't pull all the stops with dealing hard drugs and going to prison.
I think you're correct in that this is a YA book. This is a book that I would hand like my nephew when he's a teenager and be like, hey, and it would be a good book for him. It would be very digestible. And if you're a person of color, I'm sure this book, and specifically South Asian, I imagine this book is very gratifying to read, to see yourself represented on the page.
Yes, and I will encourage my niece when she reaches 13, 14 to read this, because I think that as a cis white person, it is also a very good experience to have, just because I have never experienced this kind of poverty. I have never experienced this kind of racism. And it's an enriching experience.
I think it's good. Yeah, I think it's good to get other views, especially if you're viewing this as a teenager, not necessarily so much as an adult. But yeah,
is it a three masterpiece? Maybe not, but I still think it's a heckin' good YA.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, outside of a few things that could be tightened up and tuned. Okay, so thank you all for joining us. Reminder, we have a Patreon. Join to support independent journalism. Again, I asked this question at the beginning, but in case you forgot, in the comments, let me know, is this golfer or is this tax fraud? Which...
Scooch up so they can see you better.
Yes, okay, all right. Hold on.
You're always so far down.
I know, I'm always slumping. See, guys, look how, oh God, I'm so hot. Hey, what's up? You want to go to the country club and falsify some forms? See, I did both there, so you can...
Want to do some lines and commit tax fraud?
All right, any last thoughts?
Aren't those the same thing? Maybe, possibly, it's up to you to decide. Leave it in the comments.
All right, sign us out.
No final comments. I think we've gone far enough. Thank you for showing up, and we love you all. Parasocial darling. Bye.